I was spreading rock salt on my driveway in Minneapolis when I heard her shrill voice cutting through the cold February morning air like a knife through butter. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I looked up from my work to see Brenda Whitmore marching across the street toward my property. Her face twisted into that expression I had come to know so well over the past year. She was the president of our Riverside Heights Homeowners Association, a position she wielded like a medieval monarch wielding absolute power over her kingdom. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her face, and she wore one of those expensive puffy coats that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Morning, Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Just putting down some salt so nobody slips on the ice." "That needs to stop immediately," she snapped, pointing at the bag of rock salt I had been spreading. "Do you have any idea what that stuff does to the environment, to people's pets, to the concrete?" I straightened up, feeling my back protest from the bending. At 37 years old, I had thought buying my first house would be a dream come true. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare the moment Brenda discovered she could make my life miserable over every little thing. "It's rock salt," I said slowly. "Everyone uses it in winter. It's February in Minnesota. This is pretty standard stuff." "Standard?" Her voice went up an octave. "Standard is destroying our neighborhood's aesthetic and property values. I don't think so, Robert Chambers. As HOA president, I'm informing you right now that you need to stop using that toxic substance immediately. My name is Robert Chambers, by the way, and I had moved to this neighborhood in Riverside Heights about 18 months ago. I work as a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing plant about 20 minutes from here. The house had seemed perfect, a modest 3-bedroom colonial with a decent yard and a driveway that could fit 2 cars. The HOA fees were reasonable, and the neighborhood looked clean and well-maintained. I had no idea that moving here would mean dealing with someone like Brenda. "Where exactly in the HOA rules does it say I can't use rock salt?" I asked, setting down my spreader. "It falls under Section 7, Subsection 3 of our community guidelines," she said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through it. "Any substance that could potentially damage common areas or negatively impact the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood." "My driveway isn't a common area," I pointed out, "and rock salt doesn't impact aesthetic appeal. It melts ice and prevents people from falling and breaking their necks." "Don't take that tone with me," Brenda said, her face reddening. "I'm trying to maintain standards here. Last week I saw salt residue tracked onto the sidewalk. The week before that, I noticed white stains on your driveway from where the salt had dried. It looks terrible." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that losing my temper wouldn't help anything. "Brenda, it's winter. Everyone has salt on their driveways. Look around." She glanced around the neighborhood, but her expression didn't change. "I don't care what everyone else does. I care about maintaining our property values and keeping this neighborhood looking pristine. You will stop using rock salt, or I'll be forced to issue a formal violation notice." "For using rock salt?" "Yes, in Minnesota." "Yes, in February. Your attitude is noted," she said, tapping something on her phone. "I'm documenting all of this. You have until tomorrow morning to remove any remaining salt from your property and commit to not using it again. Otherwise, you'll start accruing daily fines of $50. You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Check your email. You'll have the official notice within the hour." She turned on her heel and marched back across the street to her own house, which was admittedly the most immaculate property on the block. Her driveway was completely clear of snow and ice, though I had no idea how she managed it without salt. Probably had heated driveway systems installed, which would cost about $20,000. I stood there in the cold, watching her disappear into her house, wondering how my life had come to this. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had grown up in apartments my whole life, always dreaming of owning my own home where I could do what I wanted. Now here I was, being told I couldn't use basic winter safety supplies on my own property. My neighbor, Tom, walked out of his house next door and shook his head. He was in his 50s, a friendly guy who worked in accounting downtown. "Let me guess," he called over. "Salt violation. How did you know? She got me last month for having icicles hanging from my gutters, said they were unsightly. Made me go up there in the middle of a snowstorm to knock them down. This is insane. Welcome to the neighborhood, buddy. Brenda's been president for 3 years now, and she's only gotten worse. Last year, she tried to ban Christmas decorations after December 26th. Said the extended holiday spirit was lowering property values. What happened? Enough people complained that she backed down, but she makes everyone who defied her pay for it in other ways. Me with the icicles. The Johnsons got cited for having their trash cans visible from the street for more than 2 hours on collection day. And old Mrs. Patterson got fined because her grandson's skateboard was left in the driveway overnight. I rubbed my face with my gloved hand. So what am I supposed to do? Just let my driveway turn into an ice rink? Most people switch to sand or those expensive ice melt alternatives that cost about 4 times as much. Brenda approves those because they don't leave white residue. That's ridiculous. That's Brenda. I went inside, tracking snow into my entryway, and immediately fired up my laptop. Sure enough, there was already an email from the Riverside Heights HOA, sent from Brenda's official HOA email address. The subject line read, "Violation Notice 2847 Riverside Drive." The email was exactly as threatening as her verbal warning had been. It cited the section she had mentioned, though when I pulled up the actual HOA documents, the language was vague enough that it could mean anything or nothing. The email demanded I cease use of rock salt immediately and remove all existing salt from my property by 7 a.m. the following morning. Failure to comply would result in fines starting at $50 per day and potentially escalating to legal action. I spent the next hour reading through every single page of the HOA documents I had signed when I bought the house. It was mind-numbing stuff, mostly focused on keeping lawns mowed, houses painted in approved colors, and cars parked in garages rather than streets overnight. Nowhere did it specifically mention rock salt. The section Brenda cited was so broadly worded that it could technically apply to anything. The more I read, the angrier I got. I had been careful to follow all the rules. My lawn was immaculate in summer. My garbage cans were always stored properly, and I didn't park on the street. This was the first time Brenda had come after me for anything, and she had chosen the most ridiculous possible issue. I decided to do what any reasonable person would do. I called the city. The Minneapolis Public Works Department connected me to their winter maintenance division after a brief hold. A cheerful woman named Sandra answered. "Hi, I have kind of an unusual question," I said. "I live in a neighborhood with an HOA and the president is telling me I can't use rock salt on my driveway. Is that legal?" There was a pause. "I'm sorry, did you say she's telling you that you can't use rock salt?" "Yes. She says it's bad for the environment and the aesthetic of the neighborhood." "Sir, rock salt is the standard winter safety material used across the entire city of Minneapolis, the state of Minnesota, and pretty much anywhere that gets winter weather. We use hundreds of thousands of tons of it every winter on public roads. It's absolutely legal and, frankly, It's recommended for safety reasons. So an HOA can't ban it. Hold on, let me check with my supervisor. She put me on hold for a few minutes, during which I listened to a recording about proper snow removal techniques. When she came back, she sounded even more certain. I spoke with my supervisor and he's conferring with our legal team. They want to make sure I give you accurate information. Can I put you on hold one more time? Sure. This hold was longer, nearly 10 minutes. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching snow fall outside my window. Finally, Sandra came back on the line. Okay, I've got some information for you. Our legal department says that while HOAs can set certain aesthetic guidelines, they cannot prohibit safety measures that are recommended by the city and state for winter weather. Rock salt falls into that category. The city actively encourages residents to salt their driveways and walkways to prevent slip and fall injuries. An HOA trying to ban it would be overstepping their authority. Can I get that in writing? Absolutely. Give me your email address and I'll have our legal team send you an official statement. It might take a day or two. I gave her my email and thanked her profusely. After hanging up, I felt vindicated but still frustrated. I knew Brenda well enough by now to know that she wouldn't back down just because the city said she was wrong. She would dig in her heels and make this as difficult as possible. That evening, I got a text from my girlfriend, Grace Thompson. We had been dating for about 6 months, and she had heard plenty of stories about Brenda's antics. "How's the house?" she texted. "HOA president says I can't use rock salt." "What?" "Yeah, threatened me with fines." "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's Minnesota. In winter." "I know. Called the city. They're sending me something in writing that says HOAs can't ban safety measures." "Good. Want me to come over? I can bring wine, always." Grace showed up an hour later with a bottle of red wine and Thai takeout. She was a teacher at a local elementary school, and she had that kind of practical, no-nonsense attitude that I loved. She sat at my kitchen table, listening to the whole story while we ate pad thai and spring rolls. "So this woman wants you to let your driveway become a death trap because salt leaves white marks," she said, shaking her head, apparently. "What about when mail carriers come? Or delivery drivers? What if someone falls and gets hurt?" I tried explaining that. "She doesn't care." "She will care when someone sues her," Grace said. "You know that's where this is heading, right? If you stop using salt and someone gets injured on your property, you could be liable. But if the HOA specifically told you not to use salt, they could be liable too." I hadn't thought about it that way. "Huh, I'm serious. My school has a whole policy about this. We have to salt and shovel all walkways within a certain time frame or the district could be sued. It's basic premises liability." "That's a good point. Maybe I should mention that to Brenda." "I'm sure she'll love that," Grace said sarcastically. "She sounds like the kind of person who loves being told she's wrong." The next morning, I woke up to find another email from Brenda. This one was sent at 6 a.m., presumably right after she had inspected my driveway. "Mr. Chambers, I see that you have not removed the rock salt from your driveway as instructed. As of 7 a.m. today, you will begin accruing daily fines of $50. These fines will be added to your HOA fees and must be paid within 30 days. Continued violation may result in a lien being placed on your property. Please take this matter seriously." I forwarded the email to Sandra at Public Works and asked if they had that letter ready yet. She responded within minutes saying their legal team was still drafting it but expected to have it done by end of business today. At noon, I took my lunch break and decided to go nuclear. I called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Patricia Mendoza, and she specialized in HOA disputes. Her office was in downtown Minneapolis, and she agreed to give me a free 30-minute consultation over the phone. "Rock salt," she said after I explained the situation. "She's threatening you over rock salt." "Yes, in February." "Yes, in Minnesota." That's what I said to her. I heard Patricia typing on a keyboard. "Okay, here's the situation. HOAs have broad authority to enforce community standards, but that authority isn't unlimited. They can't prohibit things that are necessary for safety or required by local ordinances. Rock salt in winter definitely falls into the safety category. The city is going to back you up on this, right? They're sending me a letter. Perfect. Here's what you do. When you get that letter, forward it to the HOA with a polite response explaining that you're following city guidelines for winter safety. Keep using your salt. Document everything. Save every email. Take photos of your property. Keep receipts for the salt you buy. If she continues to threaten fines or actually tries to collect them, call me back. We can fight this. How much would that cost? Depends on how far she pushes it. If we can resolve it with a letter, maybe $500 to $1,000. If it goes to court, could be several thousand. But honestly, most HOA disputes like this settle quickly once the HOA realizes they're legally in the wrong. They don't want the liability. And if she doesn't back down, then we go after them for harassment and possibly sue for attorney's fees. Minnesota law allows prevailing parties in HOA disputes to recover their legal costs in certain circumstances. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Get that city letter first, send it to her, and see what happens. I thanked Patricia and hung up feeling more confident. At 4 p.m., Sandra from Public Works emailed me an official letter on city letterhead. It was beautiful. 3 paragraphs of legal language that basically said rock salt was not only legal but encouraged for winter safety, and that HOAs could not prohibit its use as it would create safety hazards and contradict city recommendations. I forwarded it to Brenda with a brief message. "Brenda, please see the attached letter from the Minneapolis Public Works Department. As you can see, rock salt is recommended by the city for winter safety and cannot be prohibited by the HOA. I will continue to use rock salt on my property to prevent injuries. Please cancel any pending fines. Thank you, Robert Chambers." Her response came back in less than 5 minutes. "Mr. Chambers, I don't care what the city says. Our HOA has its own rules and regulations that you agreed to when you purchased your property. The rules clearly state that substances harmful to the aesthetic appeal of the neighborhood are prohibited. Rock salt falls into that category. Your fines stand, and if you don't like it, you're welcome to take it up with the HOA board at next month's meeting." I stared at the email in disbelief. She really wasn't going to back down. I called Patricia back. She rejected the city letter, I told her. Says the HOA rules trump city recommendations. Patricia laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Oh, she's going to regret that. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to draft a formal letter to the HOA outlining the legal issues here. It'll cost you $250. If that doesn't work, we'll take further action. But I'm betting once the rest of the HOA board sees this letter, they're going to overrule Brenda real quick. Nobody wants to be sued. Do it." Patricia's letter arrived via email the next day, and it was a thing of beauty. 4 pages of legal reasoning, citations to Minnesota HOA law, references to premises liability, and a clear warning that continuing to pursue fines would constitute harassment and could result in a lawsuit. She sent it directly to the HOA's registered agent, which according to the public records was Brenda herself, but also copied the other 4 board members whose emails were listed on the HOA website. The response was immediate. but not from Brenda. One of the other board members, a man named Jeff Patterson, called me directly that evening. "Mr. Chambers, this is Jeff Patterson from the HOA board. I want to apologize for this situation with the rock salt. I just saw the letter from your attorney, and I have to say, I had no idea Brenda was going after you for this. She sent me violation notices and threatened daily fines. I know, I saw the emails. She forwarded them to the board. Look, between you and me, Brenda has been getting more and more aggressive with enforcement lately. A lot of us on the board are concerned about it, but she's the president and she can issue violation notices on her own authority. We only get involved if someone appeals. So what happens now? I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. Can you attend? I think we need to discuss this as a group and clarify what the actual rules are. Sure. What time? 7 p.m. at the community center. I agreed and immediately texted Grace to tell her what was happening. She called me right away. An emergency board meeting over rock salt. I know it sounds crazy. It is crazy, but I'm glad someone on the board has some sense. Want me to come with you for moral support, would you? Of course. I wouldn't miss this for anything. The next evening, Grace and I walked into the Riverside Heights Community Center at 6:55 p.m. The community center was a modest building at the edge of the neighborhood, mostly used for HOA meetings and the occasional birthday party rental. About 20 residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs facing a table where the board members would sit. Tom, my neighbor, waved us over to seats he had saved. "Word got out about the meeting," he whispered. "Everyone wants to see what happens. Brenda's been on a rampage lately, and people are getting tired of it." At exactly 7 p.m., the 5 board members filed in and took their seats at the table. Brenda sat in the middle as president, with Jeff Patterson to her right as vice president. The other 3 members were Linda Chen, the secretary, Marcus Williams, the treasurer, and an older woman named Dorothy Simmons who held the vague title of member-at-large. Brenda banged a gavel on the table. "This emergency meeting of the Riverside Heights HOA board is now in session. We're here to discuss a violation notice issued to Robert Chambers regarding the use of rock salt. Mr. Chambers, would you like to address the board?" I stood up, suddenly nervous with all eyes on me. "Yes, thank you. I'll keep this brief. I've been using rock salt on my driveway, which is standard practice for winter safety. I received a violation notice from Brenda threatening $50 daily fines if I didn't stop. I contacted the city, and they confirmed that rock salt is not only legal but recommended. They sent me a letter stating that HOAs cannot prohibit safety measures. I forwarded that to Brenda, and she rejected it, saying HOA rules trump city recommendations. My attorney then sent a formal letter explaining the legal problems with that position. That's where we are now. "Thank you, Mr. Chambers," Jeff said. "Brenda, can you explain your reasoning for the violation notice?" Brenda's face was tight. "The HOA rules are clear. Section 7, Subsection 3 prohibits substances that damage common areas or impact aesthetic appeal. Rock salt leaves unsightly white residue on driveways and can be tracked onto sidewalks. It's bad for the environment, dangerous for pets, and makes the neighborhood look unkempt." Linda Chen raised her hand. "But Brenda, his driveway isn't a common area. And the city says we can't prohibit safety measures. The city doesn't govern our HOA. We have our own rules." Marcus Williams, the treasurer, shook his head. "The city absolutely governs us, Brenda. We're not a sovereign nation. If they say we can't prohibit something for safety reasons, then we can't prohibit it." "I disagree," Brenda said firmly. "We have the authority to maintain standards in this neighborhood." Dorothy Simmons, the older woman, spoke up in a quiet but firm voice. "I've been on this board for 12 years, Brenda. Longer than you. I've never seen us try to prohibit basic safety measures. What's next? Are we going to ban smoke detectors because the chirping is annoying? Ban fire extinguishers because they are ugly?" Several residents in the audience laughed, but Brenda didn't smile. "This is different," she insisted. "How?" Jeff asked. "Explain to me how this is different." "Rock salt is a choice. There are alternatives." "Expensive alternatives," I spoke up. "The alternatives cost 4 to 5 times as much. Are you going to reimburse residents for that cost?" Brenda glared at me. "We're not obligated to subsidize your choices." "But you're obligated to not prohibit safety measures." Patricia's voice came from the back of the room. I turned to see my attorney had shown up. She walked forward carrying a briefcase. "Patricia Mendoza, representing Mr. Chambers. May I address the board?" Jeff nodded. "Please." Patricia set her briefcase on a chair and pulled out several documents. "I've prepared copies of the relevant Minnesota statutes for each board member. Minnesota law is very clear on this point. HOAs can set reasonable rules for aesthetic purposes, but those rules cannot create safety hazards or contradict municipal safety recommendations. The city of Minneapolis actively encourages rock salt use for winter safety. They use it on every public road. Several court cases in Minnesota have established that HOAs cannot prohibit common safety practices like rock salt, snow shoveling timelines, or exterior lighting for security purposes." She walked up to the table and handed a document to each board member. Brenda barely glanced at hers. "Furthermore," Patricia continued, "if Mr. Chambers were to stop using rock salt as instructed and someone were to be injured on his property due to ice, the HOA could potentially be held liable for instructing him to create an unsafe condition. That liability would extend to all homeowners in the association, as you're funded through collective dues." That got everyone's attention. Marcus flipped through the documents Patricia had given him, his expression growing more concerned with each page. "How much liability are we talking about?" he asked. "Slip and fall cases can range from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the severity of the injury. If someone suffers a traumatic brain injury or permanent disability, it could be over $1 million, and that's not counting legal fees." The room erupted in chatter. Residents turned to each other, voicing concerns and asking questions. Brenda banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! We need order!" When the room quieted down, Jeff looked at his fellow board members. "I think we need to vote on this. Personally, I don't think we have any business telling residents they can't use rock salt. It's a standard safety practice. The city endorses it, and we're opening ourselves up to massive liability if we try to ban it. I move that we rescind the violation notice against Mr. Chambers and explicitly allow rock salt use in the HOA rules." "I second that motion," Dorothy said immediately. "Discussion?" Jeff asked, though he was looking directly at Brenda. "This is a mistake," Brenda said coldly. "We're setting a precedent that residents can ignore aesthetic standards whenever they claim safety is involved." "No," Linda said. "We're setting a precedent that we won't prohibit things the city recommends for safety. That's reasonable." "I agree," Marcus added. "I've been going over our insurance policy, and I don't think we're covered for this kind of intentional creation of hazardous conditions. If we tell people not to salt and someone gets hurt, we could be looking at fines plus a lawsuit. That could bankrupt the HOA." Brenda looked around the table and seemed to realize she was alone in her position. "Fine, call the vote. All in favor of rescinding the violation notice and explicitly allowing rock salt use?" Jeff asked. 4 hands went up. Only Brenda abstained. "Motion passes," Jeff announced. "Mr. Chambers, you're cleared to use rock salt. We'll update the HOA rules to clarify this within the next 30 days, and I want to personally apologize for the hassle." The residents in the audience applauded. I felt Grace squeeze my hand, and I realized I had been holding my breath. It was over. I had won, or so I thought. After the meeting, as Grace and I were walking to my car, Brenda intercepted us in the parking lot. Her face was flushed, and she was visibly angry. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" she said, stepping into my path. "Getting your lawyer involved, making me look bad in front of the whole board." "Brenda, I just wanted to use rock salt on my driveway. You're the one who escalated this." "I was trying to maintain standards, something you clearly don't care about." Grace stepped forward. "The only standard being maintained here is safety, which you tried to compromise." "Who are you?" Brenda demanded. "Someone with common sense." Brenda's face got even redder. "You know what? Fine, you win this round, but I'm watching you, Robert. Every little thing you do wrong, every tiny violation, I will document it. One blade of grass too long, one garbage can out at the wrong time, one car parked wrong, and I'll make your life hell." "That sounds like harassment," Patricia said, appearing beside us, "which is also illegal." "You should probably stop talking now, Miss Whitmore." Brenda looked at the three of us, realized she was outnumbered, and stormed off to her car. We watched her drive away. "Well, that was pleasant," Grace said sarcastically. "She's not going to let this go," I said. "Probably not," Patricia agreed. "But you've got documentation now. If she does harass you, we can take action. Keep saving all communications, take photos of your property regularly, and don't give her any legitimate reasons to cite you. Follow every single HOA rule to the letter." Over the next few weeks, things were quiet. I continued using rock salt. The snow continued falling. My driveway remained safely ice-free. Brenda didn't contact me, though I occasionally saw her glaring at my house from across the street. Then March arrived, and with it, an unexpected development. Tom knocked on my door one Saturday morning looking excited. "There's a petition going around," he said, "to recall Brenda from the board." "What? How?" "The HOA bylaws allow for recalls if 20% of homeowners sign a petition. Jeff Patterson started it after the rock salt thing. He says Brenda's been abusing her authority and creating liability risks for the whole neighborhood. He's already got 15% of signatures, needs just a few more." "Where do I sign?" Tom handed me a clipboard with a sheet of paper attached. I read it quickly. The petition outlined several instances of Brenda's overzealous enforcement, including my rock salt situation, Tom's icicle incident, and several other cases I hadn't known about. One homeowner had been fined for having a small oil stain on their driveway. Another had been cited because their doormat was the wrong color. It went on and on. I signed it and passed it to Grace, who had come over for brunch. She signed it too, even though she didn't live in the neighborhood. "I don't think you can sign it," I told her. "You're not a homeowner here." "Oh, right." She crossed out her signature. "But I support it morally." Within a week, the petition had enough signatures. According to the HOA bylaws, a recall vote had to be scheduled within 30 days. The board set it for the first Tuesday in April. Brenda, predictably, lost her mind. She sent an email to the entire neighborhood accusing Jeff Patterson of orchestrating a coup against proper governance. She claimed the recall was motivated by residents who wanted to turn the neighborhood into a slum with no standards. She argued that allowing rock salt was just the beginning of a slippery slope that would lead to people painting their houses neon colors and parking RVs in their driveways. The email was so over the top that it actually hurt her case. Several residents who had been on the fence about the recall decided to vote for it after reading her unhinged rant. I tried to stay out of the drama, but Brenda made that impossible. 2 weeks before the recall vote, I came home from work to find a violation notice on my door. "Lawn maintenance violation," I read aloud to Grace over the phone. "Grass exceeds maximum height of 3.5 inches as measured on March 28th. "It's March," Grace said. "The grass barely growing. I know, and I mowed it last weekend." She's retaliating. Obviously. I went outside with a tape measure and checked my grass height. It was 3 inches, nowhere near the 3.5-inch maximum. I took photos from multiple angles, making sure to include the tape measure in each shot. Then I emailed them to Brenda with a polite message explaining that my grass was in compliance. Her response was brief. "Measurements were taken at 7 a.m. on March 28th. Grass may have been cut since then. Fine stands." I forwarded the entire exchange to Patricia. "This is textbook retaliation," she said when I called. "She issues a violation notice right before the recall vote, claims your grass was too long at a time when you couldn't possibly verify it, and refuses to back down even when you prove it's currently in compliance. Document everything. This might actually help your case if she continues to be a problem." The recall vote took place on a Tuesday evening at the community center. The turnout was massive. I had never seen so many neighbors in one place. The voting was done by secret ballot, with each homeowner getting one vote. The board had hired an independent accounting firm to count the ballots and ensure everything was legitimate. Brenda stood at the front of the room during the voting, her arms crossed, glaring at everyone who walked by to submit their ballot. It was incredibly awkward. Jeff Patterson sat at the opposite end of the room, trying to look neutral but clearly nervous. Grace came with me, even though she couldn't vote. We sat with Tom and his wife, Jennifer, waiting for the results. The counting took about 30 minutes. Finally, the accountant stood up. "The results of the recall vote are as follows. Total ballots cast, 137. Votes in favor of recalling Brenda Whitmore from the HOA board, 102. Votes against, 35. The recall passes." The room erupted in applause. Brenda's face went white, then red, then purple. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out without saying a word. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Jeff Patterson was elected as the new president the following week. His first act was to formally rescind all of Brenda's pending violation notices, including my fake grass citation. His second act was to revise the HOA rules to be more specific and less open to interpretation. Rock salt was explicitly allowed. Grass height requirements were adjusted to be more reasonable. The rules about trash cans and parking were clarified. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks after losing her position, Brenda did something that crossed a line from annoying to illegal. I woke up one morning in late April to find that all 4 of my car tires had been slashed. Not just punctured, but deliberately cut with something sharp. My car was sitting in my driveway, exactly where I had parked it the night before, listing heavily to one side with completely flat tires. I called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes and took a report. One of them, Officer Martinez, walked around my car examining the damage. "Definitely intentional," he said. "Clean cuts, all 4 tires. Someone was angry." "I have a pretty good idea who," I said, and explained the situation with Brenda. Officer Martinez took notes. "We'll need proof before we can do anything. Do you have security cameras?" "No." "Any of your neighbors have cameras that might have caught something?" I looked around. Tom's house had a camera pointed at his driveway, but it probably didn't cover my car. The house across the street had a Ring doorbell, but again, the angle was wrong. Then I remembered. The Johnsons, who lived 2 doors down, had recently installed a comprehensive security system with multiple cameras after their house had been broken into last year. One of those cameras pointed down the street and might have captured my driveway. "Let me check with the Johnsons," I said. Mr. Johnson was happy to help. He pulled up his security footage from the night before, and sure enough, his camera had captured everything. At 2:30 a.m., a figure wearing dark clothes and a hood had walked up to my car. The footage was grainy due to the low light, but you could clearly see the person crouched down by each tire for a minute or two. When the person stood up after the last tire, a gust of wind blew back their hood for just a moment. It was Brenda. Clear as day. Officer Martinez watched the footage 3 times. "That's pretty definitive. I'm going to need a copy of this. Mr. Johnson, can you email it to me?" "Absolutely." "Mr. Chambers, I'll need you to get an estimate for the tire replacement. This is criminal mischief, possibly criminal damage to property depending on the cost. Given that we have her on camera, we'll be issuing a warrant for her arrest." My heart started pounding. "Arrest? Really?" She committed a crime. A pretty clear-cut one. We take property crime seriously. The cost estimate from my mechanic came in at $850 for 4 new tires plus installation. That, combined with the video evidence, was enough for the police to issue an arrest warrant for Brenda. They arrested her at her home 2 days later. I wasn't there, but Tom saw it happen and called me immediately. "You won't believe this," he said breathlessly. "Cops just showed up and took Brenda away in handcuffs. She was screaming about how this was all your fault and how she was going to sue everyone." I felt a weird mix of vindication and guilt. I hadn't wanted things to go this far. I just wanted to use rock salt on my driveway. Brenda was charged with criminal damage to property, which in Minnesota is a misdemeanor if the damage is under $1,000, but can be enhanced under certain circumstances. The prosecutor assigned to the case called me to discuss what had happened. "Mr. Chambers, I'm reviewing this case, and I see there's a history of conflict between you and Miss Whitmore. Can you walk me through that?" I explained everything, from the rock salt incident to the recall vote to the harassment and retaliatory violation notices. The prosecutor listened carefully, taking notes. "So this appears to be part of an ongoing pattern of harassment that escalated to property crime," she said. "That's concerning. I'm going to recommend that the judge include a harassment restraining order as part of any plea agreement or sentence." Brenda's arraignment was scheduled for early May. I didn't attend, but I got updates from the prosecutor. Brenda had hired a lawyer who tried to argue that there wasn't enough evidence, but the video footage was damning. She ended up pleading guilty to criminal damage to property in exchange for probation, restitution for my tires, a $500 fine, and a 2-year restraining order requiring her to stay away from me and my property. The judge apparently gave her a stern lecture about how HOA disputes needed to be handled through proper legal channels, not through criminal acts of revenge. According to the court transcript the prosecutor sent me, Brenda had tried to argue that I had provoked her by destroying neighborhood standards, but the judge wasn't having it. "Miss Whitmore," the judge had said, "I don't care if Mr. Chambers painted his house chartreuse and planted plastic flamingos in his yard. That doesn't give you the right to destroy his property. You're lucky this is being charged as a misdemeanor. If the damage had been slightly higher, you could be facing felony charges." With the restraining order in place, Brenda couldn't come near my property or contact me in any way. She also had to pay for my new tires, which she did through her lawyer within 2 weeks of the sentencing. But that still wasn't the end of the story. About a month after Brenda's sentencing, Jeff Patterson called another HOA meeting. I attended, curious about what was happening. The meeting started normally, with updates about neighborhood maintenance and upcoming community events. Then Jeff cleared his throat. "Okay, there's one more thing we need to discuss. As you all know, Brenda Whitmore is no longer on the HOA board, and she's currently subject to a restraining order regarding Mr. Chambers. What you might not know is that in the process of reviewing our HOA finances after taking over as president, I discovered some irregularities." The room went silent. It appears that over the past 3 years, approximately $15,000 in HOA funds are unaccounted for. I've turned this information over to our accountant and to the police for investigation. People started murmuring. Tom leaned over to me. "You think Brenda was stealing? Wouldn't surprise me at this point." Jeff continued. "I want to be clear that this is still under investigation, and I don't want anyone jumping to conclusions. But given Brenda's recent behavior and her tight control over the finances during her time as president, there are certainly questions that need to be answered." The investigation took several months. The police brought in a forensic accountant who went through every transaction the HOA had made during Brenda's tenure. What they found was damning. Brenda had been submitting false expense reports and writing checks to herself for various neighborhood improvement projects that never actually happened. She had claimed to hire landscaping companies that didn't exist. She had billed the HOA for supplies that were never purchased. All told, she had embezzled nearly $18,000 over 3 years. The police arrested her again in August. This time, the charges were much more serious. Theft by fraud over $10,000 is a felony in Minnesota. She was looking at potential prison time. I learned all this from news reports and from Jeff, who kept the neighborhood updated. Brenda's trial was scheduled for October, but she ended up taking a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to felony theft and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, though the sentence was stayed in favor of 5 years of probation, restitution to the HOA for the full amount stolen plus interest, and 160 hours of community service. The judge also extended the restraining order to cover the entire Riverside Heights neighborhood, meaning Brenda could no longer live in her own house. She ended up selling it in November and moving somewhere else. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she had moved to a condo in a different part of Minneapolis, one without an HOA. Grace and I were sitting on my couch one evening in December, almost a full year after the rock salt incident that started everything, watching the snow fall outside. "Do you ever feel bad about what happened to her?" Grace asked. I thought about it. "Sometimes. I didn't want her to go to jail or lose her house. I just wanted to use rock salt. She made her own choices. All you did was stand up for yourself." "I know. But it's wild how much everything escalated, all over rock salt. It wasn't really about rock salt though, was it? It was about control. She couldn't handle the idea that someone would challenge her authority. Grace was right, of course. The rock salt had just been the catalyst. Brenda's need to control every aspect of the neighborhood, her inability to accept that she could be wrong, her willingness to retaliate against people who stood up to her. That was what had really caused everything to fall apart. Jeff Patterson turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He was reasonable, responsive, and actually cared about making the neighborhood a good place to live rather than just enforcing arbitrary rules. Under his leadership, the HOA started focusing on things that actually mattered, organizing community events, maintaining common areas properly, and addressing real safety concerns. The rock salt rule that had been explicitly added after my fight with Brenda became something of a neighborhood legend. People joked about it at community gatherings. Someone even made T-shirts that said, Riverside Heights, where rock salt is legal as a fundraiser for the neighborhood holiday party. In January, exactly 1 year after Brenda had first confronted me about the salt, I was outside spreading it on my driveway when Jeff walked by walking his dog. "Morning, Robert," he called out cheerfully. "Enjoying your legal use of rock salt," I laughed. "Every single time I use it. You know, in a weird way, we should probably thank you. If you hadn't fought back against Brenda, we might never have discovered the embezzlement. She might have stayed in power for years, stealing from us and making everyone miserable. Happy to help, I guess. The board was thinking about getting you a plaque or something. In recognition of saving the neighborhood from tyranny through rock salt. Please don't," he grinned. "Too late. We already ordered it." Sure enough, at the February HOA meeting, they presented me with an actual plaque. It was meant to be funny, but I was genuinely touched. The neighborhood had come together through all of this, and we were stronger for it. Grace and I got engaged in March. We decided to stay in my house in Riverside Heights after we got married. Despite everything that had happened, it really was a good neighborhood. Good people, reasonable HOA leadership, and plenty of rock salt whenever we needed it. Brenda's probation officer contacted me once that spring to let me know that Brenda was complying with all the terms of her probation, paying her restitution on schedule, and completing her community service. She had gotten a job working at a retail store and was apparently keeping her head down. I never saw her again. The restraining order meant she couldn't come anywhere near the neighborhood, and I had no reason to go looking for her. I hoped, in a way, that she had learned something from everything that had happened. That maybe losing everything had given her some perspective on what really mattered. Or maybe she was just bitter and angry and blamed me for everything. I would never know, and honestly, I was okay with that. I had my house, my fiancé, my good neighbors, and my legal rock salt. That was enough. On a cold morning in January of the following year, almost 2 years after the whole mess started, I was spreading rock salt on my driveway before heading to work. The sun was just coming up, painting the snow orange and pink. Tom came out of his house and waved. "Another beautiful winter day in Minnesota," he called over. "Nothing but clear driveways and good neighbors," I called back, and for once it was actually true. The nightmare was over. The neighborhood was peaceful. The HOA was functional and reasonable. Life was good. All because I had refused to stop using rock salt. Sometimes standing up for yourself over something small leads to bigger changes than you ever expected. Sometimes fighting against arbitrary rules exposes deeper problems. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system actually works the way it's supposed to. I finished spreading the salt, admired my handiwork, and went inside to have breakfast with Grace before heading to work. Just another normal day in Riverside Heights, where rock salt was legal, the HOA was reasonable, and homeowners could actually enjoy owning their homes the way it should be.